What began as a normal daytime conversation quickly became one of the most uncomfortable moments on live television. What happens when a routine conversation on live television takes an unexpected turn, and a guest decides to push back in real time, without raising their voice or breaking the rhythm of the show, but clearly signaling that a line has been crossed? Make sure to subscribe to Prime Voice and like and comment for more real talk show coverage. The episode begins the way many daytime talk shows do, with a familiar rhythm and an atmosphere that feels controlled and conversational. The hosts are seated at the table, greeting the audience and previewing the topics of the day. Johnny Depp is introduced as the guest, and the applause from the studio audience is warm but measured, the kind of response that reflects both recognition and curiosity. He takes his seat, exchanges polite greetings with the panel, and the camera settles into a comfortable wide shot. From the very start, the tone feels intentional, calm, and professional, as if everyone involved understands that the conversation will touch on public matters that require care and balance. The discussion opens with Johnny Depp talking about his current work and creative projects. He speaks slowly, thoughtfully, answering questions about his approach to acting and music and how he balances public attention with private life. The hosts listen attentively, nodding along, occasionally offering short follow-up questions. The pace is relaxed. There is nothing in the first few minutes that suggests tension. The audience responds with light laughter at appropriate moments, and the panel's body language remains open, with hands resting on the table and faces turned toward the guest. As the conversation progresses, the focus gradually shifts from Depp's present projects to broader topics connected to public perception and media narratives. This transition feels natural within the context of a daytime talk show, especially one known for discussing cultural conversations and personal experiences. One of the hosts references how public figures often have to navigate scrutiny, and Johnny Depp responds by acknowledging that visibility comes with expectations. His tone remains even, and he chooses his words carefully, making it clear that he understands the complexity of being discussed in public spaces. Joy Behar then enters the conversation with a question that is framed as reflective, but carries an edge that the audience seems to sense immediately. Her posture shifts slightly as she leans forward, and the studio quiets just a bit more than usual. She references past controversies and asks how Depp feels about accountability and responsibility when public figures are involved in highly visible disputes. The wording is careful, but the implication is clear enough that it changes the energy at the table. The camera cuts briefly to Depp's face, where his expression tightens just slightly, not in anger, but in concentration. Johnny Depp pauses before answering, a moment that feels longer on live television than it might in real time. That pause alone signals to viewers that the conversation has reached a more serious point. He does not interrupt or deflect immediately. Instead, he takes a breath, glances briefly toward the other hosts, and then back to Joy Behar. When he begins speaking, his voice remains calm, but there is a noticeable firmness in his delivery. He acknowledges the importance of accountability, but he also clarifies that public narratives are often simplified in ways that don't reflect the full reality of a situation. As he continues, Depp explains that he believes in addressing issues honestly, but he also emphasizes the impact of assumptions and framing. His words are measured, and he avoids assigning blame or escalating the exchange. However, his response clearly pushes back against the implication in the question. The audience listens closely, and there is a noticeable stillness in the studio. No one interrupts him, and even Joy Behar remains quiet, allowing him to finish his point. The camera alternates between close-ups of Depp and reaction shots from the panel. One host nods slowly, another tilts her head as if considering his words. The body language at the table reflects a moment of recalibration, as the conversation moves from light discussion into something more nuanced. Depp finishes his thought by saying that he welcomes fair questions, but believes context matters, especially when conversations are happening in front of millions of viewers. Joy Behar responds next, maintaining a composed tone. She clarifies that her question was not meant as an accusation, but as a way to address concerns that viewers often raise. Her explanation is calm, but the dynamic has clearly shifted. This is no longer a casual exchange. The hosts are now navigating a live moment where perspectives differ, and the audience can feel that balance is required to keep the conversation productive. Johnny Depp listens without interrupting, his hands folded loosely on the table. When he replies again, he reiterates that discussion is important, but so is precision. He mentions that when questions are framed broadly, they can unintentionally reinforce narratives that don't account for complexity. His tone remains respectful, but the message is clear. He is setting boundaries. This is the moment where viewers can see that he is not simply answering questions, but actively guiding how the conversation proceeds. The studio audience reacts subtly, with a few murmurs and scattered nods visible in the background. There is no dramatic gasp or applause, just the quiet acknowledgement that something meaningful is being discussed. One of the other hosts steps in gently, offering a bridging comment that reframes the topic toward how public conversations can evolve. This intervention helps ease the tension without dismissing what has been said. As the discussion continues, the pacing slows slightly. Everyone at the table appears more deliberate, choosing words with care. Johnny Depp shares a brief reflection on how public dialogue can benefit from listening as much as speaking. Joy Behar responds with a short acknowledgement, and the exchange settles into a more balanced rhythm. The tension does not disappear entirely, but it becomes manageable, the kind of tension that signals honest disagreement rather than conflict. From the perspective of a viewer watching live, this moment stands out not because of raised voices or dramatic gestures, but because of its authenticity. It feels unscripted, grounded in real-time reaction, and shaped by the realities of live television. The cameras continue to capture every nuance, from subtle shifts in posture to brief pauses between sentences, reminding the audience that these conversations are happening without a safety net. By the end of this part of the segment, the conversation has moved past the initial pushback, but its impact lingers. The hosts transition toward the next topic with care, and Johnny Depp remains engaged, answering subsequent questions with the same measured tone. The audience senses that they have witnessed a genuine exchange, one that reflects how disagreements can unfold respectfully on daytime television when participants remain composed and attentive. This opening portion of the segment sets the stage for what follows, establishing the context, the stakes, and the personalities involved. It shows how a single question can shift the direction of a conversation, and how a calm but firm response can reshape the tone of an entire discussion, all while the cameras keep rolling and the audience watches, fully aware that they are seeing something real unfold in the moment. As the conversation moves forward from that initial exchange, the atmosphere in the studio remains noticeably more attentive than before. There is a subtle shift in how everyone is seated at the table. The hosts are no longer leaning back casually. Instead, they sit a bit more upright, signaling to viewers that the discussion has entered a more thoughtful phase. Johnny Depp maintains steady eye contact with whoever is speaking, and the camera continues to alternate between him and the panel, capturing the quiet recalibration taking place. One of the hosts gently redirects the discussion toward the broader idea of public scrutiny, framing it as something many people in visible positions experience, not just celebrities. This approach seems intentional, an effort to widen the lens and bring the conversation back into familiar daytime talk show territory. Johnny Depp responds by agreeing with that framing, acknowledging that visibility naturally invites opinions, questions, and criticism. His tone remains even, and his pacing is deliberate, as if he is making a conscious effort to keep the discussion constructive. Joy Behar listens closely, her expression neutral but engaged. When she speaks again, she adds context to her earlier question, explaining that the show often reflects conversations happening among viewers at home. Her words are measured, and she emphasizes that the intent is dialogue rather than judgment. This clarification appears to ease some of the tension, though the seriousness of the topic remains present. The studio audience stays quiet, attentive in a way that suggests they are processing the exchange rather than reacting emotionally. Johnny Depp responds by acknowledging the role of talk shows in shaping public conversation. He notes that these platforms can encourage understanding when questions are asked with care. At the same time, he reiterates that nuance matters, especially when topics are complex and emotionally charged. His voice does not rise, but there is a consistent firmness that underscores his point. The way he speaks suggests he is not only answering the panel, but also addressing viewers who may be watching with preconceived ideas. As he speaks, the camera briefly cuts to the audience, where a few heads nod in agreement. There is no applause, but the body language reflects engagement. Back at the table, one of the hosts interjects briefly, acknowledging that balance is difficult to achieve in live discussions. This comment acts as a stabilizing moment, reinforcing that what is unfolding is a conversation rather than a confrontation. The discussion then shifts slightly toward how media narratives are formed and how quickly they can take on a life of their own. Johnny Depp explains that once a narrative is established, it often gets repeated without reassessment. He speaks calmly about the emotional toll of that process, without going into specific details or recounting events at length. This restraint aligns with the tone of the show, keeping the conversation appropriate for a daytime audience while still addressing serious themes. Joy Behar responds by noting that viewers often struggle to separate headlines from lived experiences. She says this in a reflective manner, not as a challenge, but as an observation. Her body language softens, and she leans back slightly, signaling a shift away from pointed questioning. The exchange begins to feel more like a shared examination of a difficult topic rather than a back-and-forth disagreement. Johnny Depp nods in response, agreeing that headlines rarely capture the full picture. He adds that conversations like this one, when handled respectfully, can help people think more critically about what they consume. His response feels intentional, almost like an effort to reframe the moment into something educational rather than divisive. The hosts listen without interruption, allowing him to finish his thought completely. The pacing of the segment slows further, and the tone becomes more reflective. One of the hosts comments on how live television creates unique challenges, where there is no opportunity to revise or clarify statements after the fact. This observation resonates with the moment that just occurred, and viewers can sense that everyone at the table is aware of the weight of speaking in real time. Johnny Depp responds by saying that live conversations require trust on both sides. Trust that questions are being asked in good faith, and that answers will be received openly. His words are calm, but they carry a clear message about mutual respect. Joy Behar listens attentively, nodding slightly as he speaks, which suggests acknowledgement even if not complete agreement. The studio audience remains engaged, and the quiet atmosphere underscores the seriousness of the exchange. There are no dramatic reactions, no sudden shifts in volume. Instead, the tension manifests in pauses, in careful phrasing, and in the way each speaker waits for the other to finish. From a viewer's perspective, this feels like an authentic moment of negotiation, where everyone involved is conscious of the audience and the responsibility that comes with being on air. As the conversation continues, one of the hosts introduces a question about how public figures can reclaim their narratives. This question feels like a natural progression from what has already been discussed. Johnny Depp answers by emphasizing the importance of consistency and honesty, suggesting that time and behavior often speak louder than immediate responses. His answer is thoughtful and restrained, avoiding any statements that might reignite tension. Joy Behar follows up by asking how he personally decides when to respond and when to remain silent. Her tone is softer now, and the question feels less pointed than earlier ones. Johnny Depp explains that he weighs the potential impact of his words, considering whether speaking will clarify or complicate the situation. This response appears to resonate with the panel, and one of the hosts offers a brief comment agreeing that restraint can be powerful. The segment continues to unfold with this more balanced dynamic. While the initial disagreement has not been erased, it has evolved into a broader discussion about communication, perception, and responsibility. The hosts seem satisfied that the conversation has reached a place of mutual understanding, even if perspectives differ. From the audience's point of view, the moment stands out because of its realism. There is no clear winner or resolution, just a series of thoughtful exchanges that reflect how disagreements often play out in real life. The cameras capture small details, a slight smile, a nod, a pause before speaking, all of which contribute to the sense that this is an unscripted, live interaction. As the show approaches a transition point, the hosts begin to steer the conversation toward a lighter topic, signaling that the segment will soon move on. Johnny Depp remains composed, answering the final questions with the same measured tone. The earlier tension lingers in the background, but it no longer dominates the exchange. This portion of the discussion demonstrates how a single moment of pushback can influence the direction of an entire segment. It shows how live television requires adaptability, patience, and awareness from everyone involved. Rather than escalating into confrontation, the exchange settles into something more reflective, offering viewers a glimpse into how thoughtful disagreement can unfold on a daytime talk show without losing control of the conversation or the audience. As the conversation returns from the brief transition, the tone in the studio feels steadier, but there is still an undercurrent of seriousness that carries over from the earlier exchange. The hosts re-engage Johnny Depp with a question that connects his personal experiences to broader cultural discussions, a common technique used on daytime talk shows to help viewers relate the guest's perspective to their own lives. The pacing remains controlled, and the camera settles into a familiar rhythm of wide shots and close-ups, reinforcing the sense that the show has found its footing again. Johnny Depp responds thoughtfully, expanding on how public attention can amplify both positive and negative narratives. He speaks about the responsibility that comes with being visible, not just in terms of behavior, but also in how stories are told and retold. His tone remains calm, and he avoids personal details that might escalate the conversation. Instead, he keeps his remarks general, framing them in a way that invites reflection rather than debate. Joy Behar listens, her posture relaxed but attentive. When she speaks again, she acknowledges the difficulty of navigating public perception, especially when conversations are condensed into short clips or headlines. Her comment feels less like a challenge and more like an acknowledgement of the complexity Depp has been describing. This shift is subtle, but noticeable, and it signals to viewers that the earlier tension has evolved into something more cooperative. One of the other hosts adds a brief comment about how audiences often form opinions based on limited information. This remark is met with quiet agreement from the panel, and the studio audience responds with a few nods and murmurs. The atmosphere now feels more conversational than confrontational, though the seriousness of the subject remains. Johnny Depp nods in response, signaling that he appreciates the direction the discussion is taking. As the conversation deepens, the hosts explore how live television itself can shape moments like the one that just occurred. One host points out that the lack of editing means reactions are immediate and unfiltered. Johnny Depp agrees, noting that live settings require a certain level of trust and presence. He mentions that moments of disagreement can be uncomfortable, but they can also be productive if handled with respect. The camera briefly cuts to Joy Behar, who smiles slightly as she listens. When she responds, she emphasizes that the show aims to reflect real conversations, including moments of discomfort. Her tone is measured, and she speaks slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. This response appears to close the loop on the earlier pushback, reframing it as part of the show's broader mission to engage with challenging topics openly. Johnny Depp responds by saying that he values conversations that allow space for clarification. He explains that pushing back does not necessarily mean rejecting dialogue, but rather participating in it more actively. His phrasing is deliberate, and his body language remains composed. The studio audience remains quiet, absorbing the exchange without the usual cues for applause or laughter. As the segment continues, the discussion shifts toward how public figures can use platforms responsibly. One host asks how Depp decides what to share publicly and what to keep private. This question feels like a natural extension of the previous discussion, and it allows the conversation to move forward without revisiting the earlier tension directly. Johnny Depp answers by describing the importance of boundaries, especially in a media environment that encourages constant visibility. Joy Behar follows up by asking whether those boundaries have changed over time. Her tone is curious rather than probing, and the question feels grounded in genuine interest. Depp responds by saying that experience has taught him the value of discernment. He speaks about learning when to engage and when to step back, emphasizing that not every moment requires a response. The panel listens attentively, and one host briefly interjects to note that this approach can be challenging in a culture that rewards immediacy. Johnny Depp agrees, adding that slowing down can be difficult but necessary. His response resonates with the theme of the segment, reinforcing the idea that thoughtful communication often requires patience. The studio audience reacts subtly, with a few scattered nods visible in the background. The absence of dramatic reaction underscores the grounded nature of the discussion. This is not a moment built for spectacle, but one that reflects the realities of navigating public dialogue in real time. As the conversation unfolds, the hosts continue to balance engagement with restraint. They ask follow-up questions that invite reflection rather than confrontation, and Johnny Depp responds in kind. The earlier pushback remains part of the context, but it no longer defines the exchange. Instead, it serves as a reference point for a broader discussion about communication, responsibility, and understanding. The camera captures small details that contribute to the authenticity of the moment. A host briefly adjusts her posture before speaking. Depp pauses for a second longer than usual before answering a question. Joy Behar nods quietly as a point is made. These moments, though subtle, remind viewers that this is live television, where reactions are immediate and unscripted. One of the hosts comments on how conversations like this can encourage viewers to think more critically about what they see and hear. Johnny Depp responds by agreeing, emphasizing that dialogue is most effective when it allows room for multiple perspectives. His tone remains steady, and his words are carefully chosen to avoid reigniting tension. Joy Behar adds that disagreement does not have to mean division. Her comment feels reflective, and it appears to resonate with the panel. The studio audience remains attentive, and the energy in the room feels settled, as if everyone involved has reached a shared understanding about the purpose of the conversation. As the segment approaches its later stages, the hosts begin to steer the discussion toward broader themes that can apply beyond the specific moment that sparked the pushback. They talk about the importance of listening, both on television and in everyday life. Johnny Depp contributes by sharing a brief reflection on how listening has shaped his own experiences. The exchange continues smoothly, with no interruptions or raised voices. The earlier tension has transformed into a thoughtful dialogue, demonstrating how live television can accommodate moments of disagreement without losing control. From the viewer's perspective, this progression feels natural and believable, reflecting the way real conversations often unfold when participants remain engaged and respectful. By the end of this portion of the segment, the atmosphere in the studio feels calm and reflective. The hosts appear comfortable, and Johnny Depp remains composed and attentive. The conversation has moved beyond the initial question that prompted his pushback, but the impact of that moment lingers as part of the episode's narrative. This section of the discussion highlights how a tense exchange can evolve into a meaningful conversation when handled with care. It shows the role of pacing, tone, and mutual respect in shaping live dialogue, and it offers viewers a clear sense of how such moments are navigated in real time on a daytime talk show. As the discussion continues into the next stretch of the segment, the studio settles into a rhythm that feels more reflective than reactive. The earlier pushback has clearly influenced how everyone at the table is approaching the conversation now. Questions are slightly more open-ended, and responses are given more space to unfold. From the viewer's perspective, it feels like the show has entered a phase where understanding is being prioritized over sharp exchanges, without ignoring what has already happened. One of the hosts shifts the focus toward how audiences at home interpret moments like these. She mentions that viewers often watch talk shows not just for entertainment, but to make sense of ongoing cultural conversations. Her tone is steady, and the comment feels less like a question and more like an observation. Johnny Depp listens closely, nodding as she speaks, signaling that he recognizes the role of these platforms beyond surface-level discussion. When he responds, Depp talks about the responsibility he feels when speaking on live television. He explains that he is aware his words will be replayed, quoted, and analyzed, sometimes without full context. His voice remains calm, and he avoids personalizing the statement too much. Instead, he frames it as a shared reality for anyone who speaks publicly. The way he delivers this point suggests that he is not trying to justify the earlier pushback, but to explain the mindset behind it. Joy Behar listens attentively, her expression thoughtful. When she speaks again, she reflects on how live television doesn't always allow for nuance, even when the intention is there. She acknowledges that questions can sometimes land differently than expected once they are spoken aloud. This acknowledgement feels significant, especially given the earlier moment. It does not come across as an apology, but rather as a recognition of the complexity of live conversation. The camera briefly cuts to the other hosts, who appear engaged and contemplative. One of them adds that part of the challenge is balancing directness with sensitivity, especially when discussing topics that viewers may already have strong opinions about. This comment resonates with the overall tone of the segment and helps contextualize the earlier exchange as part of a larger challenge faced by daytime talk shows. Johnny Depp responds by agreeing that balance is difficult but necessary. He mentions that pushing back, when done respectfully, can be part of maintaining that balance. His words are measured, and his delivery is steady, reinforcing the idea that disagreement does not have to derail a conversation. The studio audience remains quiet, listening closely, which adds to the sense that this is a moment of shared reflection rather than performance. As the discussion moves forward, the hosts begin to explore how moments of tension can influence public dialogue. One host notes that viewers often remember these moments more vividly than smoother exchanges. Johnny Depp acknowledges this, saying that tension tends to draw attention, but it can also open the door to deeper understanding if handled thoughtfully. His response feels intentional, as if he is trying to redirect the takeaway from the earlier moment toward something constructive. Joy Behar follows up by asking whether he believes these moments ultimately help or hinder conversations. Her tone is neutral, and the question feels genuinely curious rather than confrontational. Depp pauses briefly before answering, a small but noticeable moment that underscores the seriousness of the topic. He then explains that it depends on how the moment is framed afterward. If people focus only on the disagreement, the opportunity for understanding is lost. If they look at the full conversation, there is more to take away. The panel listens without interruption, allowing his point to land. One of the hosts nods and adds that this is often what gets lost when clips circulate online without context. This comment subtly shifts the conversation toward media consumption and how audiences engage with talk show moments after they air. The studio audience reacts with quiet murmurs of agreement, reflecting a shared awareness of how quickly moments can be reshaped outside the studio. Johnny Depp responds by saying that this is why he values longer conversations, even when they are uncomfortable. He emphasizes that discomfort can signal that something meaningful is being discussed. His tone remains calm, and he avoids framing the discomfort as conflict. Instead, he presents it as part of honest dialogue, reinforcing the grounded nature of the exchange. Joy Behar acknowledges this perspective, noting that the show often walks a fine line between asking the questions viewers want addressed and maintaining a respectful atmosphere. Her comment feels like a behind-the-scenes reflection, offering viewers insight into how the panel approaches these discussions. The dynamic at the table now feels collaborative, with everyone contributing to a shared understanding of the moment. As the segment continues, the hosts gradually introduce lighter elements, not to dismiss the seriousness of the discussion, but to signal a transition. One host makes a brief comment connecting the conversation back to Depp's creative work, suggesting that art can sometimes serve as a way to process public scrutiny. Johnny Depp responds positively, agreeing that creative expression has helped him navigate challenging periods. This shift in topic helps ease the remaining tension, and the pacing of the conversation becomes more fluid. The studio audience appears more relaxed, and the panel's body language reflects a sense of resolution, even if not complete agreement. The earlier pushback is no longer the focal point, but it remains an important reference in understanding how the conversation has unfolded. Johnny Depp continues to answer questions with the same measured tone, offering insights without oversharing. Joy Behar and the other hosts engage respectfully, allowing him to complete his thoughts without interruption. This balance reinforces the idea that the segment has successfully navigated a potentially difficult moment and emerged with a more nuanced discussion. From the viewer's perspective, this part of the episode demonstrates how live television can adapt in real time. The hosts adjust their approach, the guest responds thoughtfully, and the conversation evolves without losing its integrity. There are no dramatic gestures or raised voices, just a steady progression toward understanding. As the segment nears its conclusion, the hosts begin to wrap up the discussion, summarizing key points in a way that feels natural rather than scripted. Johnny Depp offers a final reflection on the importance of open dialogue, emphasizing that listening is just as important as speaking. His words feel consistent with everything he has said throughout the segment, reinforcing the calm, grounded tone. The studio audience responds with light applause, not loud or celebratory, but appreciative. It feels like an acknowledgement of the conversation rather than a reaction to a single moment. The camera pulls back to a wider shot of the table, capturing the composed expressions of everyone involved. This portion of the segment highlights how moments of tension can be navigated thoughtfully on live television. It shows how reflection, careful phrasing, and mutual respect can guide a conversation back toward balance. Rather than escalating, the discussion finds a steady footing, offering viewers a realistic example of how disagreements can be handled in a public setting without losing control or authenticity. As the segment moves into its final moments, the hosts begin to bring the conversation to a close in a way that feels natural and consistent with the tone that has been established. There is no abrupt shift or dramatic wrap-up. Instead, the transition happens gradually, as one of the hosts thanks Johnny Depp for engaging openly and thoughtfully with the discussion. Her tone is warm and professional, signaling to viewers that the exchange, including the earlier pushback, has been handled within the boundaries of respectful daytime television. Johnny Depp responds by expressing appreciation for the opportunity to speak in a setting that allows for dialogue rather than sound bites. His voice remains calm, and his posture relaxed, with his hands resting comfortably on the table. He emphasizes that conversations like this, even when they include moments of disagreement, can be valuable when everyone involved is willing to listen. This final comment feels like a summary of his approach throughout the segment, reinforcing the idea that his pushback earlier was about clarity, not conflict. Joy Behar offers a brief closing remark of her own, acknowledging that conversations on live television do not always go exactly as planned, but that there is value in addressing topics honestly. Her words are measured, and her expression suggests a sense of closure rather than tension. From the audience's perspective, this moment feels like a quiet acknowledgement of what unfolded, without revisiting it directly or assigning blame. The studio audience responds with a round of polite applause. It is not loud or prolonged, but steady and appreciative, the kind of reaction that reflects engagement rather than excitement. The camera briefly captures audience members smiling or nodding, reinforcing the sense that viewers in the studio felt included in a meaningful conversation. The applause fades naturally as the hosts prepare to move on. As the show transitions away from the segment, one of the hosts previews the next topic, signaling that the program is continuing as scheduled. This return to routine underscores the professionalism of the production and the panel. For viewers at home, the moment stands out precisely because it blends back into the flow of the show rather than ending on a dramatic note. After the episode airs, reactions begin to surface almost immediately. Viewers take to social media to share their thoughts, with many commenting on the tone of the exchange rather than its content alone. Some viewers note that Johnny Depp's response felt measured and composed, appreciating that he addressed the question directly without escalating the situation. Others focus on Joy Behar's role, observing that her follow-up comments helped steer the conversation toward reflection rather than confrontation. Clips from the segment begin circulating online, as is common with moments of tension on daytime talk shows. Short excerpts highlight the initial pushback, but longer clips also gain traction, showing how the conversation evolved afterward. This broader context influences how the moment is perceived, with many viewers pointing out that the exchange was more nuanced than a single clip might suggest. Media commentary reflects a similar range of perspectives. Some commentators frame the moment as an example of a guest setting boundaries on live television, while others emphasize the panel's ability to adapt and keep the discussion productive. The prevailing theme across these reactions is that the exchange felt real and unscripted, aligning with the expectations of audiences who watch daytime talk shows for honest conversation. In the days following the episode, the show's hosts briefly addressed the segment during a later broadcast. Without rehashing details, they referenced the importance of allowing space for differing perspectives and maintaining respectful dialogue. This acknowledgement is brief and understated, consistent with the show's approach to handling moments that generate discussion without overshadowing other content. Johnny Depp, for his part, does not make any immediate public statements about the exchange. This absence of follow-up commentary reinforces the impression that, for him, the moment was part of a larger conversation rather than a defining event. Viewers who revisit the episode often note that his demeanor remained consistent throughout, from the opening questions to the closing remarks. From a broader perspective, the segment becomes an example of how live television can accommodate moments of tension without losing balance. It demonstrates how hosts and guests can navigate challenging questions in real time, adjusting tone and pacing as needed. The lack of raised voices or dramatic gestures stands out, especially in contrast to more confrontational moments viewers may be accustomed to seeing elsewhere. Audience feedback continues to reflect appreciation for the grounded nature of the exchange. Many viewers comment that the conversation felt relatable, mirroring discussions people have in their own lives when addressing sensitive topics. This relatability contributes to the segment's lasting impact, even after the initial attention fades. As time passes, the moment becomes part of the broader archive of talk show discussions that illustrate how disagreement can be handled constructively. It is not remembered for a single line or reaction, but for the way the conversation unfolded over time. The pushback, the clarification, and the resolution all play a role in shaping how the segment is viewed in retrospect. For viewers watching the episode in full, the The takeaway is less about who was right or wrong and more about how the conversation was managed. The hosts maintain control of the show, the guest maintains his composure, and the audience is given space to form its own opinions. This balance reflects the strengths of the daytime talk show format when it functions as intended. As the narration draws to a close, the segment stands as a reminder that live television is unpredictable, but not unmanageable. Moments of tension can arise unexpectedly, but they do not have to define an entire conversation. When handled with care, they can contribute to a deeper, more meaningful exchange that resonates beyond the studio. If you watch this episode, your perspective might differ depending on what stood out to you, the question, the response, or the way the conversation evolved afterward. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Prime Voice for more narration-based talk show stories.